Well, that was. It was definitely a It was definitely a Frank Miller movie. Batman Year One. That is the next movie in DC's animated lineup, based on the popular graphic novel, which basically tells the it basically tells Frank Miller's own interpretation of the origin of Batman. Now, interestingly enough, Bruce Timm, the producer for a lot of these movies, and the man responsible, or one of the men responsible for a lot of the animated series, the superhero DC animated series throughout the 90s and the 2000s, this was the one he originally wanted to do when they started doing these animated movies. I mean, he wanted to start with Year One instead of Superman Doomsday. The problem was that when they started doing these, 1 or 2 years before, Batman Begins had come out. So the studio, now this is just one account I've read, the studio basically said, no, audiences will think that's redundant, especially since Batman Begins borrows a lot of elements and even scenes from Batman Year One. So in actuality, they had to wait 4 or 5 years to actually be able to tackle one of Frank Miller's so-called masterpieces. Yeah, Frank Miller can write a good story, and he can also write a good Batman story. Or at least he could back in the 80s. But I'm not here to talk about Frank Miller. I'm here to talk about this adaptation of one Frank Miller graphic novel. So, how does this hold up? Well, honestly, it's pretty good. I mean, like any movie, it has a few problems, but for the most part, this particular Frank Miller story, along with a lot of his trademarks, really translate well. I don't even want to say to the animation medium, just film in general. Now, first of all, the cast and the voice acting is so stellar. And the weird thing is, it's actually, the performances here are actually relatively understated when compared to a lot of the performances in the past. First of all, major props to the casting director. Bryan Cranston voices James Gordon, Lieutenant James Gordon in this movie. Wow, what? It's so appropriate and yet so surprisingly awesome at the same time. He lends so much gravitas to every single one of his scenes. He does an excellent job in this movie. I don't know if he's my favorite version of Commissioner Gordon. Probably not. But he's up there. I mean, when I think of the great Commissioner Gordons, I think of Bob Hastings in Batman the Animated Series. I think of Gary Oldman in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. And yeah, Cranston is up there, definitely. I mean, there is such a weight. There's such dramatic weight to literally every scene he's in, and a lot of that, true, a lot of it has to do with the script, but a significant portion of it comes from Cranston's delivery of every line. I mean, you can tell that this guy has been about a bit. He has seen some stuff. He's experienced in the ways of dealing with let's just say less than hospitable individuals. So Cranston does an excellent job. Ben McKenzie voices Batman. Now, this is the casting choice that I'm the most conflicted about, because on one hand, he's not nearly as intimidating as and not nearly as entertaining as some other voices of Batman, like Kevin Conroy or Bruce Greenwood. But taking factoring that out and taking into account that this is a younger Batman. He's 25, um, or around 25. He's in his mid 20s. So taking that into account, Mackenzie's performance actually does suit this movie surprisingly well. Not just in terms of the character's age, but also the kind of movie that they were going for. They are not going for a larger than life Batman. They're going for a very for a guy with a very hollowed and tortured soul. And Mackenzie plays that pretty well. I mean, you can tell during his scenes as Bruce Wayne, you can tell that this is a guy who doesn't really have a whole lot to live for, or he doesn't think that he has a whole lot to live for except for vengeance upon the criminal underworld for his parents' death. I mean, you can tell that this is a very damaged guy. I mean, you can tell that he's still grieving, but he desperately wants to do something about it. And Mackenzie does play that very well. His performance as Batman isn't really all that different, but it's serviceable. So he's a decent Batman. I mean, he's fairly intimidating considering how young Batman is supposed to be. I mean, when he says like, "I know pain," I mean, you could argue that it's not quite as deep. His voice isn't quite as deep as you're used to, and his voice doesn't change as much as would probably be credible for if you're playing Batman. But again, he makes up for it with his by bringing almost as much gravitas as Cranston does. Cranston is the best performance in this movie. Eliza Dushku plays Selina Kyle, who will one day become Catwoman. Now, she does a good job. I would actually like to see her as Catwoman in the future because her voice does have that kind of sharp edge to it that makes her believable in an intense role, but she also has a lot of energy, and a certain scrappiness that you would think that Catwoman would have in her early days. But at the same time, balancing those two out, she can also be pretty sexy. I mean, her voice can be pretty sensual when the situation calls for it. Which, I don't know. I think she's a hooker in this adaptation. I don't know, but Katie Sackhoff plays Detective Sarah Essen. She does a pretty good job. She's kind of like Bryan Cranston in that she's not your typical. She's kind of understated. She does lend gravitas. I keep using that word, but it's true. A lot of these voices are very down to earth and very. I don't want to use the word subtle again, but they are very. They're very soulful performances. They are very grim. That's the best word I can use to describe these performances, is grim. Katie Sackhoff does bring an element of professionalism to the character of Essen, and also you thankfully see enough beneath that to where she's not just this oh you listen to me, I am your superior officer, blah 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 blah. No, she comes across as very human, and probably could have cast it with a traditional voice actor in mind, but then again I can't really fault these guys for being cast, and I can't really call it a miscast because all these guys are well cast. Ben McKenzie is well cast as Batman. Eliza Dushku is well cast as Catwoman. Bryan Cranston is extremely well cast as Gordon. And that actually brings me to an interesting point of criticism directed towards this movie, is that a lot of people complain, or at least some people I've heard complain, that the movie isn't necessarily about Batman so much as it is about Batman and Gordon. You could have honestly called this movie Batman and Gordon Year One, because honestly, Gordon, they probably split the runtime 50-50, and the runtime ain't much. Um, when I saw the length of this movie, I was like, damn, this thing's only an hour long. This movie is 64 minutes, making it one of the shortest movies in their lineup, which is surprising considering this is something that is meant to encompass the literal first year of Batman's reign in Gotham. So to be able to cover that as well as they do in 64 minutes without it feeling rushed is pretty impressive. Now back to a point I was making earlier about Batman and Gordon sharing the screen time pretty evenly. I think it's appropriate actually, because both of them do a lot of work in trying to make Gotham a better place. Both of them are, in this case, equally interesting. I mean, neither of them really want to be in Gotham, but they feel that they have to be in Gotham. Gordon out of obligation to his employment and guilt stemming from his last job, and Bruce Wayne is back in Gotham because he wants to start his own private crusade against the criminal underworld for obvious reasons. So neither of them want to be there, and eventually their very similar goals draw them together. I mean, this is a very good story of how Batman and Gordon are eventually drawn together as allies in their fight against organized crime. So, like I said, I think it's rather fitting that this be a movie, pardon me, that this be a movie with dual protagonists, because neither one of them is bad, neither one of them is uninteresting, and that's something that I think was important to nail. Is that if you did not make Batman interesting in this movie, if you did not make Gordon interesting in this movie, then you would have lost half the movie. Now, with that being said, there are issues. Namely, the character of Selina Kyle. You know, like I said, Eliza Dushku does a good job, but she is almost completely superfluous to the main plot. She has little to nothing to do with the personal stories of Batman or Gordon. She is just kind of there. She's kind of a third wheel. She's almost a third story, but there's not enough time devoted to her to really classify her as a third story, so much as subplots that never really connects to the overall finished package. If you had excised her entire character from the story, or at the very least reduced her to a cameo or one scene, then it probably would have been fine. You would have still gotten the impression that, yeah, she's eventually going to become Catwoman, and the movie wouldn't have felt as dragged down when it comes to her scenes as it does. Because, like I said, her scenes don't really feel that important in the overall plot, which ultimately has to do with Batman and Gordon. So, yeah, she's fine when she's there, but she's not as interesting. She's not nearly as interesting as Batman and Gordon. And that has nothing to do with Eliza Dushku's performance. Like I said, the acting in this is rock solid. From the main actors to the plethora of supporting actors, like Jeff Bennett, John Polito, Alex Rocco, so on and so forth. There's not really a bad performance in this movie, but there comes a time when you have to take some artistic liberties to tell a story that translates well to film, or at the very least make it longer so that she can feel more important. And maybe that's how it was in the original source material. Maybe this movie copies verbatim what her role was in the original graphic novel. Okay, well, again, that doesn't translate well to film, and and I get the impression that the writer, the people behind this movie really wanted to do justice to Frank Miller's creation, but and they were so fixated on that they didn't really want to change a whole lot in terms of the story. So what you get is one or two plot lines that didn't really need to be there, one or two scenes that didn't really need to be there. Again, it might please fans of the graphic novels, but for casual fans, or for casual movie critics, they might be a little alienated, because they will be wondering, okay, why is this here? So yeah, it's nothing to do with me not liking Catwoman. I like Catwoman, or at least anything but the, well, I'm not going to get into a Catwoman spiel, but the point is, this is faithful to the Frank Miller source material to a fault. Because, like I said, you have the character of Catwoman and a few other scenes that could have been cut, and you would have had more time to develop Batman and Gordon in an already pretty short movie. Like I said, it's only an hour. And another minor issue with it is that since it is encompassing roughly the first year of Batman's time in Gotham, some of the scenes do feel a little rapid fire. Some of the plot developments do feel kind of rushed. Like at one point, Gordon is partnered with Detective Flass, and then it flashes forward to some future date about I don't know, a few weeks later, and Flass is going to Commissioner Loeb and saying, and then Gordon did this, and he's such a Boy Scout, and he gave us a 2-hour lecture on ethics. And I said, did we miss something? I mean, that probably would have been nice to see, or you could have eased us into that a bit more. I mean, scenes like that are a little jarring, like time skips like that, so that don't really get enough time devoted to them as they probably deserve. But again, for as bad as this could have been, this is still a very good Batman movie, and it's still a pretty good origin story. It's faithful to the novel, or at least as far as I could tell. It is very atmospheric. This is a very bleak movie. The voice acting is phenomenal, and it is a change of pace from the usual larger-than-life qualities that we normally associate these characters with. So, and again, that's fitting for a story that depicts them just starting out. So, like I said, I like this movie. The action's good. There's a very bleak atmosphere that is very appropriate. The voice acting is great. The style that they go with, the very dark grungy graphic novel style that they go with is, again, appropriate and really gives weight to the declaration that yes, Gotham needs Batman. Gotham needs cops like Commissioner or Lieutenant Gordon to make it a better place. So, yeah, I can't really think of too much more to say about this movie other than well done. Well done. And is it my favorite? Is it my favorite? No. But that doesn't change the fact that it is a commendable Batman movie. And it is a commendable comic book movie. So I recommend people check it out.